morning, church. How are we doing today? So for those who do not know me, my name is Hunter Nikolai, and I was actually here last summer as an intern, and this summer, me and my now wife, Natalie, who was up here singing, will be serving here again as interns. Thank you. We'll be doing some youth stuff, some children's stuff, obviously worship, and then I guess Eric's going to let me preach every once in a while. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether that was a good decision or not. So I'm a senior over at Boise Bible College. Go Lions. Can I get one? Curtis, you went. My man. All right. And I will be graduating this upcoming year as a preaching major, which feels really weird to say after a long, what's going to be 4 years. We may be a small Bible college of about 100 or so people, but you still get a lot of the classic college experience over there. Impactful classes, amazing professors, great community, fun intramurals to play, and hangout sessions with friends. You get late night gas stations run to obtain an ungodly amount of caffeine because that paper due tomorrow morning you thought was going to be pretty easy, and I don't need to start it now. Maybe that's just me, but all of these are included, a bunch of fun times, and of course some strong and sometimes strange traditions. Whether it's throwing guys in the creek or filling the girls' dorms with fart spray, true story, leave it to college guys to come up with some, I'm just going to call them some pretty stupid ideas. One of my favorite things that we do over at the college is what we call senior wills. Now basically, a senior will is an item that a senior will pass down to an underclassman with the hope that they too will pass it down when they graduate. They usually have some sort of meaning or significance behind them. A couple examples would be a bag of beard hair, which is passed on, and you have to cut a part of your beard off and add it to the bag and then pass it on to the next person. Stay with me here. I told you we're weird. There's a quote book which contains some of the most out of context and wild sayings made by both the students and professors. One that I received was approximately 50 VHS, and yes, I said that correctly, VHS copies of the Sister Act 2 with Whoopi Goldberg. Some of these traditions we will never understand the history of, but some we do understand. And let me introduce you to my most important and mildly disgusting senior will that I have. Approximately 20 years ago, a former Boise Bible student bought this jar of Miracle Whip and placed it in his dorm cupboard. A couple years after that, while cleaning out his dorm, he found this very same jar and devised a plan. Now, this jar right here has been passed down many, many years to many, many people who were attributed as the funniest people on campus. Now, I received this biochemical weapon last year, and it is now my duty to give it away after I graduate. And many of you may be sitting here thinking to yourselves, Hunter, this is a very disgusting and idiotic thing to hold on to. And honestly, I tend to agree. But the fact is, we tend to hold on to some pretty stupid stuff in life. How many of you have either moved or reorganized your house recently and you found that item that you don't need, you never use, and you probably haven't seen it in years, and you just, I guess I'll tape that box back up and put it over there until I have to look at it again. We hold on to some pretty stupid stuff. I got a real laugh out there. And it's not just that collection of Russian nesting dolls, which I don't know why anyone has those, but we as humans hold on to even some pretty harsh feelings, even some harsh thoughts towards others. And in our parable today, Jesus is going to talk to us about one of those stupid things that we tend to hold on to. We're going to be in Luke 14. If you have your Bibles with you, go ahead and flip over there. We'll start by just reading verse 1 here. One Sabbath day, Jesus went to eat dinner in the home of a leader of the Pharisees, and the people were watching him closely. Now we see here Jesus on the Sabbath day, and he has decided to go eat at one of the homes of the lead Pharisees. We're talking about one of the big shots of all the big shots. And it could be possibly that Jesus is joining this group of Pharisees after worshiping in the temple together, because that was custom on the Sabbath. Now, let's talk about the Sabbath a little bit, because it's a little weird for us today, because we don't really practice it like the Jews of that time. The Sabbath was set apart as a day to rest and receive from God, which is why they worshiped together, they ate together, and they enjoyed God's presence together. It was a joyous occasion for the Jewish people, and you could even say that this would be painted as a perfect scene where the Pharisees invited Jesus over for lunch, and they want to hear so many great stories and lessons from him. That's probably what's happening, right? I think we all know that's not exactly what the Pharisees had in mind. We see this shift where it says that the people were watching him closely. Jesus was being carefully examined. Every move he made, every word he said, deeply analyzed by the Pharisees. We know that the Pharisees do not like Jesus. I mean, the past 2 times that Jesus ate with them, the first time they got shown up by a sinful woman, and the second time Jesus ended up calling them whitewashed tombs. Pretty on the outside, but nothing but death on the inside. Needless to say, the Pharisees are looking for a way to trip him up. And Jesus, knowing all of this that's happening, still decides to go eat a meal with these guys. We'll read verses 2 and 3 now. There was a man there whose arms and legs were swollen. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in religious law, "Is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day or not?" A sick man lays in front of Jesus, as we see throughout many of the interactions with him. But the interesting part here is, according to the text, this sick man is either near or even inside this Pharisee's home. And that makes me beg the question, why would a Pharisee, this pompous and pious figure, invite a sick man over to his house? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Well, I would suggest that because of how we see the Pharisees interacting with Jesus, that they're trying to find a way to condemn Jesus, that this sick man was actually planted by the Pharisees. We know the Pharisees had a bunch of added laws that they followed, which made them holier than all the others. And a lot of these rules surrounded the Sabbath, what was allowed on the Lord's Day and what was definitely not. And now they want to see if Jesus is going to pass their little test. Is he going to take the bait? And I think Jesus knows what they're trying to do, and that's why he kind of goes into the offensive by asking the question. We'll start back in verse 3. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in religious law, "Is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath or not?" When they refused to answer, Jesus touched the sick man and healed him and sent him away. Then he turned to them and said, "Which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out?" Again, they could not answer him. Jesus sees their ploy and he makes his play. If your son or a cow fall into a pit, don't you rush to get him out? Don't you rush to save them, even if it is on the Sabbath day? Does this man not have value himself? Well, judging by how the Pharisees are using him as a prop for their plan, I guess they would say no. But Jesus sees this man's value, and he heals him, and he sends him away, and they could not answer him. See, the overarching idea is not to have all these restrictions on the Lord's Day. That's not what God intended, but he wants his people to do good on his day, to worship together, to eat together, to care for one another. But the Pharisees have it all twisted. They care about all the wrong things. They see Jesus as a threat to themselves, and their pride will not let them give up. Time after time, parable after parable, Jesus expertly maneuvers the Pharisees, teaching them many important lessons, and yet they still won't believe him. Not a word he says. Their pride and their arrogance will not allow them to. Can you imagine this? I would give anything to have a meal with Jesus. I mean, you sit down face to face, you can ask him any question you want, and you get to hear straight from his mouth. And you never have to worry about running out of food. I mean, we saw what he did with fishes and loaves. Imagine what he can do with a really good chicken parm recipe. It's good stuff. I don't have one, but if you do, come see me after church. Oh, really? Good to know. There's this concept in Luke's gospel about the table. And in Luke's book, we see the most stories of Jesus sitting at a table with others. Now, what does this table represent? Well, even today, the table is a place where friends and family gather and enjoy food, laughter, and each other's company. And it worked very similarly in the ancient times. The table is this picture of hospitality in almost every single culture. And the Pharisees have that very skewed. They aren't there to honor Jesus or even be generous towards him. In their eyes, he is their unwanted dinner guest that they just can't get rid of. But he's also the dinner guest that they need the most, because they are so unaware of their prejudice towards others and their own self-righteousness. As they head inside, the story continues, verse 7. When Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. When you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you has also been invited? The host will come and say, "Give this person your seat." Then you will be embarrassed, and you will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. Instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, he will come and say, "Friend, we have a better place for you." Then you will be honored in front of all the other guests. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. What a scene we have here. Jesus is standing there watching as these religious leaders bicker and push and shove, trying to get to the seat of honor. How pathetic. Here, right in front of them, is the Savior of the world himself, and all they can do is fight amongst themselves. You know, it's a bit ironic, as they're about to have a meal with Jesus, they don't hunger to know Jesus more. They don't hunger for his wisdom or his care. I mean, he literally healed a guy right in front of them about 20 seconds before this. But they are too full of themselves to ever hunger for Christ or his righteousness. Don't assume that you are the person of the most honor, because you will be asked to move. But rather take the seat of the lowest position and wait for the host to call you forward, and then you will be honored. It's kind of hard to imagine this, but he uses an analogy or a metaphor of a wedding, so let's do that too. My wedding was about 2 weeks ago. I know, thank you. Round of applause? No? Okay, whatever. That was stupid. It was about 2 weeks ago, and it was an amazing time. And as most of you know, there are reserved seats at the wedding in the front for those closest to the bride and the groom, family members, friends. You know how it is. And it would take some real gumption to go up and sit in one of those seats when you weren't supposed to. I mean, surely someone would ask you to move if you went and sat in like where my mom was supposed to be. That would be really messed up. I'm not going to lie. And it'd be pretty embarrassing to have to walk back down that aisle to the seat that's at the very far back. I mean, Eric was at my wedding, and I love you, Eric, but I would be pretty upset that if after the ceremony, I go and sit down at the reception table, and I look to my right, expecting to see my wife, and you're right there, and she's all the way in the back, like table 9 or something like that. That would be pretty upsetting. And here we see the Pharisees fighting for that spot that honestly, Jesus probably deserves. And he has a simple but powerful message for them. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. You know, preaching is really easy when the main point is kind of pointed at this much. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. You can either pick humility or humiliation. Those are the options that are presented here. And you don't have to be a Bible scholar to know that these still apply to us today. Do you want to be praised by the world, or do you want to be praised by your King? Do you want to fight for your status here on earth, or do you want to be patient and receive what the Lord has for you? Because it's really easy not to care for others. It's really easy to go about your day only caring about yourself. It's hard to serve. It's hard to submit our lives to God. But that's what we're called to do. 1 Peter 5 says, all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Humility is seeing yourself accurately, which is through the eyes of Christ. This means not getting too high on yourself, but it also means not getting too low on yourself. I heard a pastor talk about how sometimes we as Christians, we act like humility is having some sort of divine depression. And it's lowering ourselves as much as possible so that people can walk all over us. But that's not true at all. You are made in the image of God. And you have value and gifts and talents and worth. And all of those things have been given to us by God. That's the point. It's a popular phrase, but humility is not necessarily thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. When we put ourselves at the top of the podium, it makes it a little hard for us to raise our King and others around us higher. But that's what we're called to do. I mean, looking back at the sermon last week, what are the two greatest commandments? Even the Pharisee got it right. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. And in order to love God and others effectively, we need to show humility. Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. I think that pride is one of the main weapons that the enemy uses against us to get us off course. I mean, when you think about it, all sin can be boiled down to pride. It's saying that I'm the most important person here, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do. It's saying that I know better than God, and I'm going to control my life the way I want to control my life. Now, I don't think any of us would say that out loud, but that's what it is. Pride convinces us to only worry about ourselves, to put these blinders on and bulldoze through anyone who gets in our way. It can be in small forms or large forms, but pride is always there. It hides inside of us, waiting to come out. It's ugly, it's gross, and sometimes we don't even know why we hold on to it. Sometimes we drown it out, but sometimes we listen to it. And it causes us to be bitter towards others, to be harsh and short with people, even when they haven't done anything wrong against us. Pride impacts our communities, our churches, our families, and even our souls. But Jesus' kingdom is so much different than that. Jesus finishes the section in verses 12 through 14 here. Then he turned to his host. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, brothers, relatives, and rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. And let me be clear that Jesus is not saying to stop hanging out with your friends and family, but he is telling you to maybe open up those actions to others. Your rich neighbors and relatives are great guests, and they most likely will invite you into their homes or give you gifts or something like that. But what about the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind? What about those who never get invited to the dinner parties? I mean, when we look at all the stories of Jesus eating with others in the Gospel of Luke, who did he eat with? The tax collectors, the sexually immoral, thieves, slanderers, the scum of society. Bless those who may not be able to bless you back. Bless those who may be disregarded in the eyes of others, and the Lord will give you your reward. But only when you humble yourself and serve others, no matter what their background is, their race, their political party, their sexuality, their worldview, because even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And he calls us to do the same. I want to finish today with a story that happened to me back when I was in high school. Now, our youth group, this is back in Oregon, our youth group took a team over to Portland to do a service project. And we partnered with this organization from the area. And basically what they did is once a week they would set up shop under one of the bridges downtown, and they'd have a bunch of different stations that were providing for needs for the homeless population. And if you know the Portland area at all, you know that that's a pretty large need over there. And we checked in and we went through the short training, and they were showing us all the different stations that you can volunteer at. And they randomly handed our youth pastors a bunch of slips that just had the names of all the different stations. And they began handing them out. And I'm sitting there looking at this list, and I thought, yeah, this is a pretty cool setup. I mean, I could totally pass out some jeans. I could warm up some food and give it to people. I mean, I could try and give a haircut. It can't be that bad, right? And I stop at the bottom of the list, and it just says foot washing. And I kind of just laughed in my head. I mean, good luck to the sucker who has to do that one, right? Because there's no chance that I'm going to be washing people's feet today. I mean, it's like a station of 4 people, and there's 100 of us. So the odds, that's not going to happen, right? Then I look over, and my youth pastor hands me a slip, and to this day, I don't know if he did it on purpose or if it was a complete accident, but I think you guys know where this story's going. And I remember looking up at him, and I kind of just, are you serious? Is this actually happening? He kind of just nodded at me and moved on. And this was a bit of a pride check for me. I mean, you guys know how seniors in high school are. They're, no offense, guys, but the pride's there. It's definitely there. And I was the varsity athlete. I was the funny guy. I thought I was the hottest thing around. I couldn't even comprehend doing something like that. And I couldn't just switch with someone, so I guess I have to see it through. And we start walking over to the station, and in this moment, I'm not okay. I'm freaking out, and I'm panicking. I'm I don't know what I'm going to do. This is so gross. How am I going to do this? And we got there. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't even want to be there anymore. And my buddy kneels down, and he helps the first person that comes up, and I'm just thinking in my head, this is disgusting. Do you not think this is gross? What's going on? Can't they just go over to the stream and wipe off there? What is the point of what I'm doing here? And all of a sudden, sure enough, somebody was sitting in the chair right in front of me. And I guess here goes nothing. And I knelt down and I began to wash her feet. I remember it being really uncomfortable. But as time went on, I started noticing other things. I started noticing all these different people with their own stories and struggles. I remember talking to Frio about his problems with addiction, and my friend sharing the gospel with him. Now, this foot cleaning station wasn't really about cleaning feet. Obviously, they needed that too, but it was more about just serving others. Yeah, they probably could have gone over to a stream and started to rinse off over there, but where else is someone going to intently listen to their story? Where else are they going to see themselves being cared for in this way? I saw smile after smile light up and jokes being cracked left and right. I saw the gospel being lived out in a situation that I did not want to be a part of. But that was only able to happen when I checked my pride, I listened to the Lord, and I did what He asked me to do. And I would like to challenge you guys with that today, to humbly serve our God and the ones around us, the less fortunate and the needy, and to not let our pride blind us, but to let it go, because it truly is more blessed to give than to receive.